Buen día a todos. ¿Cómo han estado? Espero que hayan estado bien. Soy Austin, and today's video kicks off the next phase of our series on Spanish verb conjugations. Today, we're going to discuss a topic which is crucial to effectively employing the Spanish language, and that's the subjunctive mood. This is a topic which can be confusing to many Spanish students, and it's one that I personally had a hard time with when I was in school. But today I'm going to break it down for you to make it easy to understand. Honestly, I feel that Spanish lessons in school really do the subjunctive a disservice because they usually wait way too long to introduce it. And by then, many students, myself included when I was taking my classes, end up seeing it as just this weird thing in Spanish that you don't really have to use all that often. Well, I'm here to tell you that is dead wrong. The subjunctive is used all the time in Spanish. And as a matter of fact, we use it all the time in English too, except we don't notice it in English because our verbs don't change their conjugations in the subjunctive mood. Spanish verbs, on the other hand, do use a different set of conjugations, and you will never be fluent without incorporating the subjunctive into your speech. I'm going to be as brief as possible today, but I don't want to leave out important info. So this video is going to be a bit on the longer side. Just stay with me. So grab yourself a snack and a drink, kick your feet up, and let's get to work. So in the broad sense, what is the subjunctive? Well, it's what's known as a mood, which is basically a separate set of conjugations that's used in specific situations. In Spanish, there are three moods: the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. The indicative mood is used to express what the speaker believes to be true. The imperative mood is for giving affirmative or negative commands. And the subjunctive mood is used for, well, pretty much everything else. Now, I'll just point out really quickly here that the indicative mood is only used to express what the speaker believes to be true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be right. If someone wants to say, La luna está hecha de queso, or the moon is made of cheese, that's the indicative mood, because the speaker, as delusional as they may be, thinks that what they're saying is actually true. Now, many Spanish teachers use the acronym W.E.I.R.D.O when introducing the subjunctive. That stands for wishes, emotions, impersonal expressions, recommendations, doubt, and ojalá. While I'm not the biggest fan of this acronym because I feel it's a little overly simplistic and it leads students to believe that the subjunctive itself is some weird and complicated thing, for the purpose of this video, we're going to use it. But in my opinion, what's really weird is trying to teach students only half a language and wait until way down the road to start teaching the other half. Basically, what it boils down to, though, is this. The indicative mood is used to express what we believe to be true, and the subjunctive is used to talk about how we feel about things. In other words, the indicative mood is used to speak objectively on things, and the subjunctive mood is used to speak subjectively on things. Now, are you starting to see why it's so important for us to begin using the subjunctive as soon as possible when learning Spanish? Can you get through a whole day talking in English without speaking subjectively on things? Of course not. Now, one thing that's going to be a dead giveaway telling us to use the subjunctive is when you have a subject change separated by a conjunction. Most commonly, that's going to be que, or that. Okay, so now that we have a basic understanding of how the subjunctive works, let's talk a little bit about how to conjugate it in the present tense. The first thing we need to know is how to conjugate the indicative present, or the simple present tense, in its yo form. From there, whether the verb is regular or not, if it uses an O ending in that yo form, we'll drop the O and replace it with the appropriate ending. If you have an irregular verb that doesn't end in an O in the present yo form, that tells us that the verb uses its own specific conjugation patterns, which will have to be memorized individually. Sorry about that. For our AR verbs, the endings that replace the O in the present yo form are as follows. E for yo, es for tú and vos, e for él, ella, and usted, hemos for nosotros and nosotras, es with an accented E for vosotros and vosotras, and en for ellos, ellas, and ustedes. For our ER and IR verbs, we use the same endings but with an A instead of that E. So that gives us A for yo, as for tú and vos, a for él, ella, and usted, amos for nosotros and nosotras, ais with an accented A for vosotros and vosotras, and an for ellos, ellas, and ustedes. Did you notice something from those conjugations? The subjunctive mood basically swaps the endings for regular AR and ER verbs from the indicative present tense, and yo uses the same endings for él, ella, and usted instead of the O. Now's a good time to give you a quick reminder on pronunciation. You'll need to make sure to stress the proper syllable in the word according to standard pronunciation rules so that you don't accidentally say a different word with a different meaning. For example, yo hable is the present subjunctive form for hablar, but yo hablé is the indicative preterite form. If the word uses an accent mark, always stress it there. If it doesn't, stress the second to last syllable for all words ending with a vowel, N, or S. For all other words, we stress the last syllable. Okay, now let's talk a bit about what to expect with irregular verbs. While there will be certain exceptions, there are basically two patterns that we can usually expect to see here, and they all tie back to how we conjugate that indicative present yo form. Firstly, if the irregular verb is a stem changer, but not an ending changer, then the original stem is going to be retained in the subjunctive for nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, and vosotras. Two examples are the verb querer, to want, and poder, to be able to. And I'll throw those conjugations up on the screen for you now so you can pause to review them. Word of warning, ignore this rule with E to I stem changers, which will all change their stem in the subjunctive, like seguir, to follow, and pedir, to ask for or to order. And here's those conjugations. If the verb is an ending changer in the indicative yo form, then whatever stem it uses in the indicative yo form will be retained in all its forms in the subjunctive. Two examples are caber, to fit, and oír, to hear. Here's those conjugations. Finally, there's a number of verbs which are so irregular that they don't follow any of these rules in the subjunctive. Don't worry though, like I've taught you in my previous videos, the most irregular verbs are also the most commonly used. So you'll have these memorized pretty dang quickly after just a little while practicing. I'll put the present indicative and subjunctive conjugations up on the screen for the most commonly used verbs for you here, so you can pause to review them. The most common ones include haber, which is a very special auxiliary verb, which I've already briefly covered and will get its own video sometime. Along with ser, to be, used for characteristics, estar, to be, used for situations, ir, to go, and saber, to know. All right, now that we know our conjugations, let's go through our W.E.I.R.D.O acronym. In the interest of time in this video, I'll incorporate the practice section into this next phase of the lesson as well. I'll tell you what each letter in the acronym stands for, and then I'll give you some sentences in English with the target verbs unconjugated. I'll share the indicative present conjugations for any irregular verbs that follow the patterns I described earlier, and it'll be up to you to conjugate our verb into the subjunctive. We're going to do this pretty quickly, so sigue concentrado. The W stands for wishes, which is what we hope somebody else will do or what we hope will happen. If I want to say, I hope that you come to the party, the translation for that is espero que tú venir a la fiesta. Espero que means I hope that, which is our trigger that tells us that what comes next is going to be in the subjunctive. The verb venir, which means to come, is irregular, and the conjugations for the indicative form are up on the screen. So our answer is espero que vengas a la fiesta. Let's move on. Our next letter in the acronym is E for emotions. If we want to express an emotion regarding something that's happening or what someone is doing, we use the subjunctive mood. For example, if we want to say, he's glad that I have a new car, the translation is, se alegra de que tener un auto nuevo. Se alegra de que, he's glad that, is our trigger phrase. So what's next has to be subjunctive. Tener, to have, is also irregular in the indicative present, so here's those conjugations. The answer is, se alegra de que tenga un auto nuevo. All right, moving on. Next up, we've got the I for impersonal expressions. These are similar to expressing emotions, but instead, we're claiming a certain action has a certain characteristic. Oftentimes, these expressions are constructed using es adjective, que, as our trigger. For example, if I want to say, it's urgent that they pay us today, the translation is, es urgente que nos pagar hoy. Pagar is regular, so you're on your own here. Here, es urgente que is our subjunctive trigger, and our answer is, es urgente que nos paguen hoy. To keep the pronunciation of that hard G the same, we need to add a U between G and E. Otherwise, the word P-A-G-E-N would be pronounced as pahen. This will make more sense when I release a video on pronouncing consonants, so stay tuned for when that drops. Moving on, we have R for recommendations. Now, this one is pretty self-explanatory. When we want to give advice or suggestions to somebody on what we think they should do, for example, if I want to say to a friend who's struggling in school, I recommend that you go out less and study more, the translation is, te recomiendo que salir menos y estudiar más. We have two subjunctive verbs here, salir, to go out, and estudiar, to study. Salir is irregular, and here are its conjugations. Estudiar is regular. Our answer is, te recomiendo que salgas menos y estudies más. All right, let's keep going. Two more. Our second to last letter is D for doubt. This one is pretty simple as well. If we wish to express something that we don't think is true or that we doubt could be true, that's a subjunctive trigger as well. One example would be, I doubt that he'll arrive on time, which will be translated as dudo que él llegar a tiempo. Remember that we need to adjust our spelling a little bit to preserve our pronunciation when an E follows after a G. Okay, so the answer is dudo que llegue a tiempo. Finally, we have O for ojalá. Ojalá is a Spanish word of Arabic origin. Spanish actually has lots of words derived from Arabic, and it means I hope or pray to God or God willing. Ojalá is pretty much exactly the same as our W, wishes. The only real difference is that it doesn't require the conjunction afterwards, meaning you could say ojalá que or just ojalá, and they mean the exact same thing. One example we can look at is God willing it doesn't rain, which would translate to ojalá no llover. Llover is irregular, and you can see its conjugations in the indicative present here. Ojalá no llueva. Okay, that's going to wrap up our lightning practice round. I know we went through that pretty dang quickly, so if you got some wrong and need to go back to review the irregular patterns or the W.E.I.R.D.O acronym, I totally get it. The important thing is that you tried, and as long as you keep trying, you'll never stop improving. If you got all of the answers right, wow, genial! Now before I leave you, I want to share with you two extremely common uses for the subjunctive that don't exactly fit into W.E.I.R.D.O. So that and unless. If we do something so that or para que something happens, that triggers the subjunctive. If something will happen unless or a no ser que something else happens, that also triggers the subjunctive mood. All right. Well, that's going to do us for today. We've gone through a lot of information, and there is a lot more to the subjunctive mood that I'll share with you as we go along with our lessons. If you can remember only one thing from this video, it's this. The indicative is for talking objectively, and the subjunctive is for talking subjectively. And you'll need both in order to reach conversational fluency. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of the subjunctive mood in Spanish and feel a little more confident in building it into your sentences going forward. If you feel you've learned something helpful today, please drop a like on this video. And if you have any questions at all or want to try practicing some subjunctive constructions, leave a comment down below and we can discuss it further there. My next video will talk about using the subjunctive in the past with the imperfect tense. So make sure you're subscribed to be here when that drops. Espero que te haya gustado el video. Que tengas un buen día.